Hello, everyone. Last time we had a more structured and very long conversation about Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson. Today we're going to have a shorter, probably quite meandering and rambly discussion about the recent changes of the structure of the higher levels of the Russian state, particularly with regards to the Defense Ministry and the Security Council. Now, anybody who's been listening for a while will know that I think that Nikolai Patrushev, the Secretary of the Security Council, is one of the most significant political figures in the Russian Federation right now, possibly the most significant aside from Putin. He is now being removed from the Security Council position. This doesn't mean that he's out of the government. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov, discussing the changes, has told us that he will continue working within the government and that his new position will be announced within the next few days. We will get back to that in a moment, but the other central development that we have to discuss is who will be replacing him on the Security Council in that position. The replacement will be Sergei Shoigu, who has been the defense minister for the last 12 years, and he, at the defense ministry, will be replaced by the economist Andrei Belousov. Before this, Belousov was the first deputy prime minister, a post which will now be filled by Denis Manturov, who was previously a minister in charge of industry and mining, I believe, along with one of the deputy prime ministers. There's also been a significantly notable new appointment to the post of deputy prime minister, of which there are a good number. The new deputy prime minister is Dmitry Patrushev. He's the son of the previously mentioned Nikolai Patrushev of the Security Council, and we will touch more on the significance of that in just a moment. Now, there have been a number of jokes regarding Shoigu's removal from the defense ministry about staying away from windows and such, that he might be in danger. That suggestion seems to be fairly popular in the general discourse. That's not even remotely accurate. The shift to the Security Council post is technically a promotion. Again, more on that later, but it is also a sign of safety and that he is essentially in a decent place vis-a-vis his position with Putin, if not necessarily his place within the government. It is worth noting that there was talk about a deadline given to Shoigu by Putin for taking the Ukrainian town of Chasiv Yar in Donetsk by the May 9th victory parade, which has thus far not been accomplished 4 days after the victory parade. And I'm certainly not going to deny that there is a possibility of connection there, but I am skeptical. Shoigu does not have that much control over direct military affairs. That's kind of not really his forte. That's not the defense minister's job in time of war. Instead, he's supposed to be focusing on the economic and industrial side of it, on supplying the army, on maintaining logistics, on providing the necessary armaments and munitions to fight the war, on managing the defense industrial base. So that is not generally the kind of job that you are working with the kind of grimy details of military affairs. That would be the top command post in the army right now is the chief of the general staff, and that is Valery Gerasimov, who, according to, again, Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, will not be replaced or moved in the near future. But the choice to replace him with Belousov is interesting. Shoigu was not a career soldier. He wasn't quite an economist, but he wasn't a soldier. Shoigu was originally a minor party boss in the Russian Far East, and then he was the Minister of Emergency Situations. He was also briefly the chair of Putin's political party at the time, Unity, what has now become United Russia. And he was briefly also the governor of Moscow. Now, the things that he is not, as you may have gathered based on that list, he is not an economist. So I would suggest that this reassignment suggests a focus on the more economic, industrial side of winning a war, as opposed to dissatisfaction with the way that the war is actually being waged on the ground. It also suggests a new focus on militarizing the economy as a priority, which they've been moving towards for some time, but, ramping that up, moving along faster with it, and perhaps moving in a different or more effective way. Now, the secretaryship of the Security Council is, in theory, legally a very important position. one of the president's chief advisors on security issues, including foreign policy, including war. But it's also worth noting that it is a position which generally does not come with its own backing and leaves one entirely dependent on connections. Patrushev was placed very well for this role, having come out of the FSB and previously the KGB, where he had spent basically his entire career, and having numerous connections there, as well as the most important thing, being very well connected to Putin, which Shoigu also is. But Shoigu is probably less well positioned to exploit contacts in the defense ministry than Patrushev was with regards to the FSB. Particularly considering that just, I want to say 2 weeks ago, one of Shoigu's associates, the deputy defense minister Timur Ivanov, was not only fired from his job, but also arrested. And not like arrested as in there's going to be a trial soon, but arrested as in he's in prison. He's in Lefortovo currently. And I believe there is a trial scheduled for late June, I think June 23rd or 24th. Now, Shoigu isn't leaving the defense game entirely. He will be appointed also the presidential representative to the Military Industrial Commission, and he will also be involved with the Federal Service for Military Technical Cooperation. My interpretation of that would be that it is a measure designed to avoid too much shakeup or chaos during the course of the transition, particularly as defense industry and the war are deeply intertwined and of the utmost priority to Putin right now. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, this is a very safe place for Shoigu to be. I don't think he's going to be taking on Patrushev's advisory role to the same extent. And Shoigu is very much less aligned with Putin ideologically than Patrushev is. He's also a lot more cautious. He was not entirely on board, not even with the current war, but not even with the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And we've seen the Security Council used as a demotion tool before for people who Putin trusts, appreciates, and considers to have been loyal and deserving of his own loyalty, and also having perhaps too much information to be cast out of the government entirely. We've seen the Security Council used for that task before, particularly right now I'm thinking of the deputy chairman of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, who occupies a post that was created specifically for him after he was fired from being prime minister. I would be hesitant to conclude that that is what is happening here, but I think it was worth mentioning. Now, going back to Patrushev, as I mentioned already, he's been removed from his position as Secretary of the Security Council, and they have so far, the Russian government has not told us where he will land, except that he will be staying within the government. So there are a lot of questions that are left unanswered at this point. There are indeed multiple messages that we can take from the proceeding of events, particularly in terms of the promotion of his son Dmitry Patrushev to deputy prime minister. Previously he was the agriculture minister. It could be a sign of renewed confidence ahead of a new and equal or equally significant job posting, or it could be essentially a consolation prize. So I think to a degree we'll have to wait to judge exactly what his position is until we learn what his new job is. And even then, it's kind of hard to say. His big significance isn't in the job that he held, although it was somewhat symbolic of his position. But he was primarily somebody who Putin trusted. He was an advisor, and I'd imagine that not having access to direct reserves of hard power as he did as the FSB director probably made it easier for Putin to trust him and his advice, because it would make it more difficult for him to stage any sort of forceful supplanting. Now, Patrushev is a very extreme figure. He's very hawkish, very conspiracy inclined. In many ways, I think it's safe to say that he is more extreme than Putin. And Shoigu, as we've mentioned, is a more cautious, more conservative, and generally less ideologically extreme character. But what I'm getting at here is that even if Patrushev was to lose his position as the Secretary of the Security Council without acquiring an equivalent position, it's very possible that he would still retain his position essentially as a head advisor to Putin, because not everything within the Russian regime is formal. One of Putin's most important, influences and advisors of a sort is a completely unofficial person who has a very limited standing within the government, and that is which one is it? Yuri Kovalchuk, I think. There's two of them. There's Yuri and there's Mikhail. I think Yuri is the one that I'm thinking of. And with regards to the Kovalchuk family, Yuri's son Boris Kovalchuk was also appointed to a position within the new government. Aside from that, most of the major posts were kept the same. Mikhail Mishustin will stay on as prime minister, and Sergei Lavrov as foreign minister. The heads of the security agencies will also all stay on. Sergei Naryshkin for the SVR, Alexander Bortnikov for the FSB, Dmitry Kochnev for the Federal Protection Service, that's essentially semi-equivalent to the United States Secret Service, and Viktor Zolotov for Rosgvardia, the National Guard. So aside from the major reshuffle of Belousov, Patrushev, and Shoigu, there don't seem to be any other major shifts within the cabinet reshuffle. So this is a big one, but it seems to be relatively the only one. And that is about all that I have to say on the subject for now. I hope to do a follow-up once we have a better idea of where Patrushev is landing. And thank you for joining me for this meandering and casual discussion about the changes in the Russian cabinet. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.